We're joined by somebody who knows this firsthand. James Peters has spent over 20 years navigating high-pressure roles at companies like Meta and Cisco, sourcing world-class talent and leading with precision in fast-paced environments. But what truly defines James's work is what came after the hardest moments of his life: personal loss, emotional exhaustion, and the kind of adversity that doesn't show up in a resume. Out of that, he built a system, a mission, a voice. Today, James is a resilience coach and adversity strategist who helps professionals turn pain into purpose and lead themselves through uncertainty. James, welcome. Before we dive into your tools and frameworks, could you start by telling us a bit about your journey and what brought you to this work?
Yes, absolutely. No, thanks for having me, and thanks for the introduction, David. So yes, as mentioned, James here. So my work really has sort of, as I say, spanned sort of 20 odd years in recruitment. Starting agency side, worked at businesses, Microsoft, Meta, now Cisco, worked agency side, lived in the US for a number of years as well. So done a number of different works in the recruitment field. I guess really where some of the work which I want to go into and a little bit more deep dive in today is everything which kind of happened beyond sort of 2017. I went through sort of personal loss on quite a dramatic scale, and I had no tool set at that particular time to navigate those challenges. So I really want to sort of go into some of how I was able to do that, and I'll start sharing my screen with the slides and deep dive a little bit more. Across what you could classify sort of, I guess, unimaginable sort of loss adversity. I had lost my dad first in February of 2017, in February. And then lost my son in July of 2017. So we're about 8 years on from that. He was 4 years old. But at that particular time, they do say things come in threes. In very close after that, then I was accused of a crime I hadn't done. And suddenly found myself in a police cell under criminal investigation and had no tool set to cope with these particular things. Actually had generally what you classify as quite a privileged or quite privileged upbringing, and just hadn't been through any sort of traumatic experience or really faced any sort of real losses. And suddenly I had three incidents which were taking myself, and it was really how I could try to navigate those. As that particular time, I was also a kind of a co-business owner, and I was working with a number of London-based startups and executing hiring plans for them. So I really didn't have opportunity to, I guess, have time off because I was very much reliant on me, to fulfill what I needed to do. So I really want to start to go into some of the tools I actually started to implement as I went through navigating these in these difficult circumstances. So first, I want to sort of touch on is why adversity hurts us so much. So what I've particularly found is that it comes with an identity loss. When we do face a particular crisis, we lose actually our sense of who we are, the story we've maybe told about ourselves, which is then being sort of shattered. As this is a quote from one of the coaches I had at the time, and he went, "An event really is just an event until we actually give it meaning." But that's what we're always doing at every point in every sort of moment in our life. We're giving things particular meanings and what that means to us, be it good or bad. We're labeling it, and it's how we can actually become and look at things more from a neutral perspective. Obviously that's super challenging, and obviously a tool set needs to be built up before we can really start to look at things in that particular way. But now I see those circumstances 8 years ago now as just really events in my life journey, and I don't try to attach any particular meaning to it, good or bad. And how can I then start looking at those events and look at them from a gratitude perspective, that they actually did happen for a positive reason. But again, this is something you kind of do generally navigate. I think over the last sort of 7-8 years, I probably have invested, I would say 60, 70, 80 odd thousand. It could even be more than that in personal development coaching, in that particular time, initially starting out in, counseling and therapy, and then obviously moving up and working with people like well, Peter Sage here in the UK, who's a Tony Robbins trainer. I've worked with people like Kevin Trudeau in the US, and a lady called Natasha Graziano as well here in the UK, or now living in the US. So actually quite high profile people around mindset. So learned a number of different challenge or strategies from them, but how I could really start looking at things differently. There is actually one TED talk, which is on, you can find on YouTube, on Tony Robbins. I think it's back about 13 years ago. And it's called Why We Do What We Do. It's a very powerful TED talk, very powerful TED talk, because it really gives us an overview about why we do what we do. That he puts things into 6 human needs: the needs for certainty, uncertainty, significance, love, connection, and then growth and contribution. So that's why I wanted to put that uncertainty here, because we suddenly find ourselves, especially in loss, this can even be loss of a job as well, that we're suddenly faced in uncertainty. And a lot of people haven't built that muscle of uncertainty. We generally, are more weighted on certainty. And it can also be in careers as well. If we have a particular job and we lose it, then suddenly we're thrown into an uncertain time, and that uncertainty breeds a lot of anxiety. It can also be if you're used to working as an employee mindset and then wanting to be more of an entrepreneur, and you more go into more of a kind of an entrepreneurial mindset, different way of working, different way of thinking, brings a lot of uncertainty, and sometimes we're not ready for that. And those are some of the things which again come up if we want to make a change in our life. And also isolation as well. I think sometimes pain can separate us. It did for me. Feeling misunderstood, connection seemed a lot more distant, or very hard to have. Personally, for my situation, because I was going through a number of different things at the time, I withdrew myself a lot more from the world. I just ended up sort of operating from a very much, just working and then doing nothing else and working again, because that was my go-to mode of operation. And it was only really once I started to be able to have conversations, especially through therapy, that I was able to start really, start talking and explaining myself in a lot better way. So that's really why I wanted to sort of overview why adversity can hurt us so much, because it can really change the core of who we think we are. This one is about sort of having, leadership, in the dark, and that's leadership. We want to talk about leadership more from, I guess, from ourself. What I believe, in authentic type leadership isn't about, job titles or anything like that. It's like how we can really, carry ourselves through the difficult times, because we don't always have the answers, especially, taking this into a context of, working and maybe leading a team or anything like that. Sometimes we don't personally have the answers for ourselves, but how can we show up and be the best version of ourselves in difficult times? It could be even obviously if we have, kids or wife or husband as well, again, showing up for them, and showing how we lead through difficult times has a huge impact. This is something I've again started to learn through my own journey. Obviously, don't have any children now, but I've realized that how we show up as as ourselves, especially if we are a parent, really does have a huge impact on the people around us, especially children, especially if they're younger than sort of 6 years old. That does have an imprint on them. So how can we show up with integrity, and lead ourselves through the chaos, and how we can really sort of ground ourselves a lot more, because that will have a ripple effect, not only in the teams we work with and in work, but also found our sort of family environment as well, and the future of them, especially from from children perspective. I want to touch here on sort of the resilience and really understanding that it's a trainable skill. I think sometimes we get into a mindset that we think that some people have resilience and some people don't, but realistically this is something which we personally build ourselves. After the sort of the sort of, I guess, experiences I went through, I really went on more of a growth-minded, resilience-based mindset and building that, because obviously coming from a ground zero background, not having done anything, the journey back was a long one and a difficult one. So what I started to learn is there's always going to be challenges in life, and that's going to come at any stages. It may not be as dramatic or as severe as maybe I've had already. But yeah, I mean, I was at Meta and worked there, and I went through a job loss sort of in around that sort of May time of 2023, and something again wasn't massively expecting. So that was another challenge which came up, but I did then at least have some tool sets to be able to fall back on. I've also done a number of ultra marathons over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I've done a number of, I've been through a civilian Navy SEALs training. I've put myself in stand-up comedy type situations where I've done stuff which is massively really uncomfortable for me as a person, but ultimately is building that resilience, more mindset, and it's really understanding that our brain is plastic. It's it rewires through repetition, and so resilience is clearly a muscle which it can be built. And what I always do try to say to people is, even if generally things are okay or rosy in life and everything's going quite well, it's still to build that muscle, because we always know that unfortunately sort of hard times are always around the corner. So it's how we can continue to build that muscle over time, because what I've found is when fear, I guess, does rise for us as a human, our intelligence plummets, and we sometimes start to make very poor decisions when we operate out of fear. And it's not really by choice, it's just by the way of our sort of biological system, or of how it's wired, really. Blood is very much squeezed out of our sort of frontal lobe in the neocortex front of our brain and redirected to the back of the brain. And with that, it then leads to sometimes making very poor decisions in the heat of the moment, or when we're in fear-based thinking. So again, it's how we train ourselves to lead under pressure. And again, I'm going to go through some go-to tools to help you on that as well. So I think really the self-leadership is key. When really when no one's watching, when you're at home on your own and things aren't going well, or things are difficult, how can we lead ourselves when no one's really watching us? And what I've found is just to take really small steps of what that looks like for you, for you as a person. And I say getting out of bed can sometimes feel very, very challenging. I've known that as well. I think when back into 2017, I didn't really want to do anything. I didn't really want to get out of bed. But what I learned is I would always have a go-to, which was 2 minutes of meditation in the morning. And at that time, I just used an app. I've sort of moved a little bit higher than that now, and kind of moved through the school grades a little bit. But a 2-minute meditation app, I think I used Calm app at the time, was really powerful for me. What I found was, because I was going through a legal challenge as well at that time, I was going to sit down with my legal team on a sort of a bi-weekly basis, and they found it quite difficult with myself, because I was just in shock. I was in rabbits in the headlight type. I didn't really know what had just happened, and they found it very difficult to communicate with me. I found it very difficult to open up, and there was a lot of worry on their side, because I was going to have to go into court, and I was going to have to take the stand, and I was going to have to defend myself, and they were really struggling to be able to have really a strong two-way conversation with me. But what I found is, when I did start meditating, and even it was very basic, it was only 2 minutes a day in the morning, within 2 weeks they noticed a night and day difference with me, because what I'd been able to do, which I hadn't realized at the time, is I'd ended up was able to sort of get myself out of this really high level of anxiety and a high level of sort of fight or flight zone, which I'll go into again a little bit later on, and really start to calm my nervous system. And with that, I was then able to start speaking clearly. I was ended up starting to be able to have rational thinking, and it made a monumental difference. And so what I do say to people is, yeah, even if it's a small step and like a couple of minutes meditation, you know, to start the day, it could be journaling. I was doing some journaling at that time as well. These are really powerful tools which you can really tap into very quickly. And then it's being able, once you've done that and you kind of set that sort of early start and early win in the day, then you can show up and, you know, it's taking that responsibility. It could be emailing someone who you don't really want to do. It's, you know, depending if it's, you know, whatever that may be, if it's, you know, looking, you know, potentially looking for another role or switch for another job, or sending an email to someone who, you know, there's some friction there. But you feel so much better once you've done that sort of pre-work before stepping into, you know, stepping in to make a decision like that. And it's always really, what I would always say is, it's acknowledging the small victories, because they always build momentum. You know, you always want to be your own biggest cheerleader, and unfortunately sometimes we're not. We're probably the one who is more detrimental to ourselves. We talk, you know, and at negative self-talk, for example, we put ourselves down, where actually we want to be our biggest cheerleader. And really with that, we can really start building our confidence going forward as well. I don't want to sort of continue to chat. If anyone has any questions or want to touch on anything I've mentioned so far.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment and just firstly say thank you so much for already sharing so much. I can't even imagine the loss that you went through, and being able to talk about it and learn from it is very powerful. So just wanted to say thank you first for sharing. Yeah, I already feel it's quite profound. I actually just did a meditation retreat.
Oh, amazing.
And in northern Thailand, and it just resonates what you're saying. They recommend you can just stick to 5 minutes a day. It's quite powerful. So I'm on that journey too, trying to stick with it, but it's it can be a very good tool. So yeah, interesting that you also were able to tap into that. It helped you so much.
No, thanks so much for sharing. That's awesome that you've been on a meditation retreat. They're so powerful, those. I think I personally did one mid last year, probably about a year ago now, here in the UK, but it was a Vipassana meditation retreat. And it's a silent retreat. You meditate probably up to about 8 hours a day. You are around other people, but you can't have eye contact, you can't communicate with them. You're actually on your own, in yourself, in your own sort of bubble, even though around people for 10 days. And it was, again, a super powerful, enlightening experience. But yes, did come back from that, and they really recommend you doing 2 hours of meditation a day, 1 hour in the morning, probably 1 hour in the evening. And I remember, do you find it quite difficult? I did. I'm probably about 6 weeks I kept it up, but then yes, it kind of fell back to about sort of 10-15 minutes. But no, it's great. You know, it's such a powerful tool to have, so that's awesome. Talking here, so I think what I want to talk about is around the nervous system here, and really the nervous system really dictates our whole life, and really as early as, I guess, everything sort of prior to 6 years old, where that's really sort of where our nervous system starts to get programmed. So it can be a lot around the environments we grew up in. So this is why you do hear a lot around, going back to our childhood and really looking at some of the root causes to why we are the person today. A lot of it's around that particular environment, but everything's really pre 6 years old, because we don't have any rational thinking at that particular time. We're basically a sponge. We're kind of just absorbing everything in. So, a lot will then, come from, parents or people who we're around at that particular time. And so we do find is, really regulating our nervous system is really paramount to the way we live our life, because it shows up in everything. It can show up in relationships we have with other people. It shows up in work. It shows up in, just the way we are as a person. And so how can we really, that's what it's about, really, is regulating our nervous system. This is where things like breath work or meditation do come in very, very powerfully. And obviously you heard with, people obviously take ice baths and, guys therapy and that type of stuff. This is another thing around, how we can switch from our sympathetic nervous system, activating more of our parasympathetic nervous system. So this is what I found is actually quite a very profound way, and you can do this at any particular time, is just be more conscious of the way you breathe. I think we all know how to breathe, but sometimes we're not consciously aware of what that looks like. So first we really want to do, obviously, breathe in through our nose and out through our nose. There is some techniques where you can use that, use through your nose and out through your mouth, but in general it's very much sort of preferred that is in through your nose, out, sort of in through your nose, out through your nose. Also breathing in, when I'm more conscious of it, and it's something to train, is when I breathe in through my nose, I count in 4, but and I focus my attention probably around sort of 2 inches below my belly button, and the stomach. So when I breathe in, my stomach goes out, and then when I breathe out, my stomach goes in. No, sorry. When I breathe in, my stomach goes out, and then obviously when I breathe out, my stomach comes in, and you just do that. But you're paying consciously aware, because what that does, obviously you have your heart chakra and you have your your third eye chakra, and what you're doing is you kind of breathing up and out, but you're consciously aware of it, and you can really regulate your nervous system quite quickly. You only need to do, I would probably say 5 minutes at most of that type of breathing can be very, very powerful. So that's one tool I would use, is to be conscious of your breathing, 2 inches below your belly button. When you breathe in through your nose, your stomach goes out, and then obviously when you breathe back in, out through your nose, stomach goes out. So it goes in. So that's really one way which I would recommend. Moving is very key. This is a really simple way of, I guess, hacking our biochemistry, is just going out for a walk, and what I do always say to people is, don't take any electrical items with you, a phone or anything like that. Just take yourself and you, and if you obviously have a pet dog or anything like that, myself, I do, so I always go out for a walk with my dog, then I just more consciously aware of what's around me. Is a really powerful way to do it. And sometimes I always find, if you can sort of look slightly above as well. I think sometimes we have a strategy where we sometimes look down a little bit, but if we are feeling down, then we look down, whereas obviously we want to feel better and feel good, we look up. So we'll just take the A line and just slightly elevate it, and again, that's just a hack to feel better, if you aren't feeling the best at that particular time. Grounding, I found, is a really powerful tool, like placing your feet firmly on the ground. It could be outside in the garden. I personally like to connect more with the source energy, so more about put my bare feet outside, but you can do it indoors as well. But then just notice what 5 things are touching your body. Like, it could be the sun, it could be the wind, it could be the socks you've got on, it could be the trousers, shorts, anything like that. But you really notice the elements against your skin, a bit wearing all the elements, and kind of notice those. Can bring yourself into the present moment. A very easy way to do it, because after you've done this type of work, then you really start to regulate your system, and then you're accessing kind of your prefrontal cortex, and you're having clearer thinking, you're having rational thinking. You can think better, and you can act better, and you can make conscious choices, and the choices and decisions are better. So really, everything goes back, to the particular nervous system. I can touch on that a little bit on the next slide. Is understanding the resilience gap. So one thing again is looking at or the people I work with. So I kind of have a little sort of mantra to a certain extent. It's called PBTA, which is pause, breathe, think, act. So I sometimes write that on top of my journal each day, just to say, just to remind myself to pause and then breathe, and then think, and then obviously have a think and then make that decision, instead of not making sort of autopilot decisions which aren't benefiting me as a person. Just having that stimulus response. Viktor Frankl said in his Man's Search for Meaning, which is a great book, but he kind of says here that between the stimulus and the response there's a space, and that space is where your power is and your response is. So it's about being able to pause and then make that, and then react, and then make that decision, because that's really, you're making that very powerful choice, and not operating off an automated pattern of behavior and the program. And again, it's what some people would call sleeping awake. I think most people probably are sleeping awake. They're just running off automated patterns of behavior because that's who they are and that's what they do. And it's being able to have a lot more of making more conscious decisions in how we act and show up. And it can be obviously in particular around phone addiction. So many people just pick up their phone and scroll or look at or do sort of things without really a conscious choice as to understanding why they're doing it. It's just a habit they do. And if you can have that PBTA in place, that when you do go to pick up your phone, which is fine, but there's a decision to make. You've actually made your conscious decision to do that. And if it is to go on, be it Facebook or Instagram or X or one of the social media platforms, then you're making a decision that you're going on there to do X amount or do a certain thing, and you're going to be there for maybe 5 minutes, and you maybe put a timer to it, and then then you sort of come away from it. But then you've made that choice yourself. You've been consciously in control there, instead of just picking up the phone, scrolling, then realizing what am I doing. So that kind of pause process is very, 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 very powerful. This is kind of a little bit more around the nervous system and where it fits in the polyvagal ladder. This is something which Stephen Porges theory map was done, and it's really kind of 3 stages of where our nervous system is. A lot of people are in that sympathetic zone. It's fight or flight, it's anxiety, it's very much reactivity. This is very useful in immediate danger. So obviously from our ancestry, saber-toothed tigers and could be eaten. They were operating in a fight or flight type situation because they were always alert for danger. We're still the form of a human is still has those patterns, but it's obviously we're not threatened by maybe saber-toothed tigers now, but it could be a credit card bill, it could be a loss of a job, it could be really anything which comes up in a day-to-day type thing. We find it more, especially with social media, when we're more anxious and around likes and comments and all these type of stuff. That's playing in kind of a fight or flight zone. Is how we can recognize that and understand, okay, I feel this way. I can actually feel I'm in this particular zone. Like, how can I get more to that ventral vagal? How can I get more connection and clarity? How can I get to that state? Well, we do that by going through. That's where we tap into stuff like meditation. That's when we tap into breath work, which is when we tap into things like cold water therapy and all these type of different things. There's so many modalities out there now. But this is what helps us get to that more ventral vagal and less out the sympathetic zone, because the more we operate in sympathetic, which is, I kind of use the analogy, it's like you sitting in your car and you just have your foot on the gas and you just revving the engine. It's highly, it's highly stressed. It's in that stressful zone. You got to think that's where your body is. Your body's operating in that type of similar environment, and it can't last there. That's where people have burnout. And they suffer with low energy, because really their system's just on all the time, and people will actually, they stay in this state, have a lot of health issues, they burn out their adrenals, because the body is just highly strung all the time, and you can see it through maybe the way some people talk. You can kind of find that they're highly strung. Some people act, if people are always fidgeting, tapping their feet, all the time, or just moving around, like someone who's generally quite highly strung and needs quite high anxiety. And again, it's useful for certain things, but ultimately day to day and generally for what we do, it's not, it's actually quite damaging for our health to stay there. That's why those particular tool sets starting to work on are very powerful to use. Some people are at the dorsal stage. I mean, I was probably at the dorsal stage at the very beginning, just complete shutdown. Just had nothing. There's a numbness, there's a disconnection. There was just nothing there. Like the lights inside had gone. And that's obviously, a difficult stage, and obviously people who are, and obviously people who are maybe in depression, in those sort of potential, even like suicidal type states. This is where a lot of where they're based, where there's just, they don't feel anything. And so how can we, start to move up that ladder, and how they can start to tap into to the next stage. You can't go from dorsal straight up to ventral. You have to go through the stages, and that's really when obviously these tools do work. But sometimes it's also being able to start tapping into gratitude and be grateful for where things are. And again, it's a harder tool set to build from that particular area, but it's a step-by-step process. And I have worked with people at the very beginning when I started my work who were in this stage, and it's a difficult stage to move out from. You do find a lot of people who are heavily on antidepressants at this particular stage, which is very useful at the beginning, but ultimately sometimes people have long-term challenges to move away from that and look at more sort of holistic type operations or ways to work. So I do recommend, sometimes it's using both. If someone is in that dorsal stage, then it's probably using both of those particular strategies before, and they can kind of move into, more the holistic stage moving forward. And so these are this kind of a little bit more of a survival to strategy, and of what that particularly sort of looked like. So I think having rituals is really important. Habits, positive habits, really powerful to start. It's never early. And I've mentioned here like a 5 a.m. meditation. It's what I do, but it's not, it could be 6 or 7. It's something in place where you can, have your time, me time in the morning, even if it's just for half an hour, which you can carve out, and that may be, 5 or 10 minute meditation, a little bit of journaling. You could, if it's stretching or mobility type exercises. I've mentioned running because I'm a runner, but it could be, it doesn't have to be. It could be a walk walk outside, especially obviously now in the summertime, weather's better. But just having that sort of time for you before you set on your day, you're not picking up your phone too early. It could be the morning ritual, and then maybe sort of, half an hour after that, then you look into your phone. I think that, so again, you're making these conscious choices, and you're starting the day on the right foot. You've done the work, you've journaled a little bit, you've set out your agenda for the particular day, what that's going to look like. You've done a few different tools, very powerful to start from there. I think growth mindset, always looking for opportunities to develop our strengths, always looking for opportunities to increase our, knowledge. Again, obviously on a call like this, but that can be, that's a growth mindset. You're looking at ways to which you can, better yourself and develop strengths for you, which I think is always going to have a ripple effect for people around you. One of the things I do mention, to people is that, our inner world leads, our outer world follows. So if we do have challenges in our outer world environments, physical reality, the only place we can start is always the mirror. And because that's always a self-inquiry, and how we can show up best for ourselves, and how we work on ourselves, be it knowledge we're bringing in, meditation, breath work, what we're trying to do. Because generally, if we start to feel better inside, then the outer world circumstances start to change as well. Finding purpose, can be difficult. I think, sometimes purpose, is thrust upon us. I mean, a little bit like myself, like I wasn't on this journey, 7, 8 years ago. I hadn't done any personal development. You've probably heard of Tony Robbins. That was about it. Hadn't picked up a self-development book. And obviously fast forward and suddenly done all these different things. And I'm a certified coach as well. I've been through a Jay Shetty program back in 2021 to become a certified coach as well. So, but I wasn't on this journey, kind of the universe to a certain extent, pushed me in the direction which I wouldn't have chosen. So sometimes purpose comes in very painful ways for us, but maybe it's a way of which is pushing us in a situation where we wouldn't naturally choose that direction ourselves. So that purpose, I think sometimes when you do these particular work on yourself, things start to show up, and you start to give it a little bit more of a light, and that's really when things do go wrong in our day-to-day work or role, or outer or life, could be a relationship, business, whatever, then we can sometimes tap into that there's a higher meaning where there's something, we're bound for something different, and sometimes it's difficult to tap into that at that particular time. But if we can always look at it from a positive perspective, that the universe does things for us, not to us, then that's a powerful mindset shift when we are going through some challenges. And then obviously team building, I'll kind of put it in there just because how we lead ourselves as a person is always going to be, reflect on people we lead in work or in outside of work. And that's really what I think grieving taught me, is around having that authentic connection. I think before this, I was a very different person. I looked at things a little bit differently. And I probably lacked a little bit of empathy and compassion as a person, and that built obviously over that particular time. And having more of an authentic connection with others, I'm always open to sharing, what I've been through and how, and just really how it could help someone else, really. And obviously, it's always been having that mindset of, if it impacts one person, then that's great. So here's just a little bit of sort of a recap and a little bit of a challenge. You all get these slides, so you can take it away and yeah, look at one of these challenges and let me know how it goes. But really, I start to identify what have you been avoiding that maybe needs attention, and then committing, like making that brave move this week. What could that be? What's that sort of, could be a challenge for you, a little bit of a stretch, and just can always remember that adversity is something to survive. It's fuel. It's great. It forms our transformation. And a little bit touched on, life is always, what I found is a beautiful feedback mechanism. Most people generally, unfortunately, are completely oblivious to, probably at more of an exponential level, but also intellectually, that the truth is that, again, is our outer world always a reflection of who we are internally. So if we don't have what we really want in the outer world, really, sometimes we go out and go and chase things to change that, where actually everything really is within us already, and we just have to tap into that. And that's it, I think, pretty much.